Welcome to Peg Warmers. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Chris. What's up?
And we're here to talk about toys. We got Chris from Long's Toys on today, and our topic is what makes a convention great. I was at ZoloCon over the weekend, and it kind of got me thinking about what are things that make a con good, what are things that make a con bad, and we're sort of talking about conventions and toy shows lumped together because the terms get used kind of interchangeably. For me, a convention has more than just vendors, is the way I look at it, and a toy show is strictly vendors.
That makes sense.
But there's a sort of a small gray area between like, oh, they have the author of a book and that's the guest, or they have like people from a movie. Like there's
for sure, yeah,
a lot of that kind of stuff. So I put together some talking points for us here. So what makes a convention great? I have a couple of little flyers here for upcoming shows. Like I said, I was just at ZoloCon. Raiders of the Lost Toys has a show coming up in Woodbury, New Jersey on March 16th. That's a show that I vend at pretty much every time they run. They usually do October and March. Farpoint has its toy show coming up in May. That's their free to attend, free to vend event. And then, of course, RetroCon will be this fall, which is the biggest of these three events. And there's tons of other shows. New Jersey Collectors Convention's coming up, and Joe Fest is this summer. Like, there's so many conventions and conventions for other things beyond toys. There's video game shows and all that other stuff. Are you going to Power Morphicon? Is that happening this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Power Morphicon is the second to last weekend in August. I think it's like the 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in that area. So yes, I got the hotel, which I feel like is the hardest thing to lock down, like flights and that kind of stuff you got to get closer to. So as of right now, I have the hotel, so I'm trying to make it work for this year.
As long as you got a place to stay when you get there.
Right, exactly.
All right, so ticket prices. I've been to shows that range from free to probably around $50. A show that costs under $10, I'm not expecting much from the event organizer. Like, I'm here to see vendors, probably. It's a toy show, is free. They have people outside in tents. Their stores open. The original version of that with when they were part of It's a Toy Store, I think they used to even give away free hot dogs and sodas. Like, that was like an amazingly awesome free event. And you used to find great stuff at it. You still find great stuff at it in the new format, and now they have food trucks that come and stuff like that. So it's morphed and evolved as their location changed and everything, but it's still a really cool event. And then you move on to like fire hall type shows where it's one little room of vendors, things like that. If it's going to be around $20, that's when you start to think, okay, there's going to be something else for my value, whether that's like a raffle or some sort of a guest, or maybe some sort of a exhibit, things like that in general. And then when you're going over $30, that's where I'm used to it being more of like an event, Yeah,
and I think, like you said, it's actually kind of nice because when you see the price of a ticket, you kind of, from experience, get that mindset of, okay, I know what bucket this is going to fall into. Like you said, $10 or less, maybe as much as $15. This is going to be a fire hall. This is going to be a room at a hotel, something like that. And most of the time they're charging that just to kind of cover the cost of renting that space, which I'm totally fine with. You know what I mean? They're doing this to make money to live. I 100% support that, of course. And, you just have to go in with the right expectation and you'll have a good time. Like you said, this kind of stuff you mentioned, like New Hope has a toy hall or a fire hall toy show.
Yep.
New Jersey CollectorCon, of course, comes to mind. And that's a good size space. And I think that show's usually like $5 to $10 or something like that, which is great. You don't have to pay for parking there, which is another thing that's nice. So yeah, that can be a really good time as long as you go in with the right mindset. I mean, if you're like, oh, a toy convention and it's $10 and I'm going to see, all these guests, and it's like, no, you have to know what you're going in for. But that can be a really great time if you're literally just looking for somewhere to go, peruse some toys for the afternoon, maybe with some buddies, get some lunch or something. That can be a great way to spend a Saturday. But yeah, there can be, like you said, then you start to get into the $20, something like RetroCon, where it's a wonderful balance, a ton of vendors, some fun celebrities. We're not talking, movie celebrities. You know, we're not talking Tom Cruise, something ridiculous like that, but
Right.
people you know from your childhood, is very much on brand for the theme of the convention. And it's great. It's a great show. Honestly, RetroCon, one of my favorite shows ever. Honestly, I try to get there every year if I can. I think the balance is perfect. It's a nice size. The place, you know, the amount of vendors, the guests, it's in a great location. You don't have to pay for parking there. There's places to eat around. I feel like that just works. Everything about RetroCon is a very good model. If I was going to try to put on my own show, which I'm not because I don't have that ambition, but it's a very well-oiled machine from years of what works, what doesn't work, and it's a great model. Then you start to get into those ones where it's like fan expo stuff that's in like major cities.
Right.
So for years, I used to go to Wizard World in Philly every year. It was a great time. It was pricey, but it was usually like $90 for the weekend. You got a 4-day pass. Now the 4th day was like 3 hours on Thursday, and it was always like 2 to 5. I don't know who was going to this. I guess if you're specifically flying in and you got a hotel in the city, you'd go for a couple hours because I'm sure it's dead. But I used to take Friday off of work, and we'd go all day Friday. And it was nice because we had a system kind of nailed down where it was Friday was the day we went to all the vendors because the showroom was the least amount of people.
That makes sense.
Because it was a weekday. And so you kind of check that all out, make your purchases. And then Saturday was great for panels. They used to have an amazing panel schedule from stuff like, you know, littler things like learn how to cosplay. They'd have a couple cosplay people, give them a panel. And it was in a smaller room, but it was great. They'd have smaller things like I wrote a book about 80s cartoons and I want to talk about my book that I read. And then you'd have your larger things like the main stage would have people from current television shows, like the cast of Arrow was there a bunch of times, or like, you know, movie stars. Trying to think who I saw over the years, but I think they had actually Loki and Thor were there once. They had a panel together. So a very large gamut and some high profile people. And so the price justified, do you know what I mean? It was a weekend. We used to make a weekend out of it every year. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of value there.
I think also with that value, you know, if it's a multi-day event, you also have to expect, you know, if it's a $20 event, but it's for 2 days, that, if you're paying $40, you know, like there's that scale of economy to it, you know, like you're saying it was $90 for 4 days. You go, okay, I kind of see how that comes out. Plus anything in a major city is going to be more expensive just because.
And you did have to pay for parking and that's fine. Parking was crazy, but it was close and we knew the one to go to and we had our routine and we used to go to the Reading Terminal Market for lunch. That was amazing. Sometimes hard to find a seat in there, especially on Saturday. But it was also kind of nice because like the panels, it seemed like they did the most panels on Saturday, but that was good because then you could avoid the super crowded dealer room that day. And then Sunday you kind of went to do cleanup. If there was anything you were going to try to haggle on, or maybe 1 or 2 panels they'd spill onto Sunday or something like that. So it was great. Then the pandemic happened. Wizard World was already kind of going bankrupt, unfortunately. And then the pandemic was just the final nail in the lid of the coffin. And they got bought out by something called Fan Expo.
Right.
And I had never really heard of Fan Expo. I guess they had been around in other cities for a couple years. And Fan Expo is still the $90, $100 for a weekend. But then there's all these nickel and dime sub costs. So it's like you're looking at the panel schedule. This celebrity's meet and greet has an additional cost. This screening of blah, blah, blah has an additional cost. So we went one last year. I think it was last year. We're like, we'll go on just Saturday. Yeah, it'll be crowded, but I don't want to buy a whole weekend before I know what I'm getting into with this.
See what the new
and
format's
so we went on the Saturday and they had Hayden Christensen. I was like, damn, great game. I'm excited. I want to check this out. They did that thing that I don't love where they put the panel room on the floor. Like there's some kind of magical curtain that blocks out all of the sound, which it doesn't. But it was at least a dedicated enough space that you could kind of sit towards the middle of the space, and then you had a little bit of distance between you and the main floor. So I got really excited to see Hayden Christensen. People were lining up hours and hours before his panel. So by the time I showed up, they're like, well, here's what we did. You can still go to the panel free with your normal admission, but we also introduced a gold and silver tier just for this panel ticket. And so gold will guarantee you get in. Silver will pretty much guarantee you get in. And then if they all get in, then the normal admission people can go in. And I'm like, so you want to sell me at least a silver membership, and that still might not guarantee that I get in? So I'm going to pay you additional money and still not get it? Like, super shady. So I just said to the guy, I said, well, look, I'm not paying, because they had guys like monitoring the lines.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to pay for any additional membership. I said, the cost to get into this place was already expensive enough. If I had the normal membership, before I even bother to get in line, is it worth my time? And he's like, I can't guarantee you won't get in. He's like, I can't guarantee you will. I said, look, my wife's tired. She wants to go home. Should we just go home? And he's like, might not be a bad idea. So I'm like, all right, fine. So that was his wink and a nudge.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, they just nickel and dime. And I'm like, Wizard World always had enough space. They would have these, because the the Philadelphia Convention Center has some massive ballrooms.
Yes.
And that's where they would be like, we know Thor and Loki, going to be a big draw, put them in the massive room. And there was never a problem. You might have to sit all the way at the back, but they also have those screens on the side so you can see everything. And then Fan Expo took over, and I went one time, and I was just like, well, that's something I love that's dead. So that's a real shame, because I'm not going back to that.
The pandemic taking out another thing we loved.
It's such a shame, because it really was really nice. And then you have your even crazier stuff like NYCC, but we'll talk about that later.
So we've kind of touched on this already, but like the venues, obviously the price goes along with that. And I've had a great time at shows in every one of these locations. And I've also been to shows that were boring in every type of location. It just depends on what you're there for and what you see or who you're with. There's so many factors with that kind of stuff. So this shot's actually from It's a Toy Show. Somebody posted on Twitter that they saw me, and you can see all the tents and stuff set up for the different vendors.
Nice. Yeah, like I said, I really think it comes down to mindset. If you know what you're getting into and you have a crew that you're going with, you can have fun. And to me, the venue is not the problem. It's how the show is run. If that's the problem, you know what I mean? Like, that's where the problems arise.
So here's two factors that can really spoil your experience before you get in. Parking and registration can be a nightmare. Most shows, it's fine. You might have to circle the parking lot once or something like that. But we've all been stuck in a really long line to get into a show, and we've all had parking disasters.
And I hate when there is a line to look at the parking lot. That is the worst. I'm like, if I want to look at the parking lot, I want to get right in there. I don't want to wait in line for that.
The registration thing, I work registration at a couple different cons with Too Many Games and RetroCon, and it's such a hard thing to know what to expect. Like, there are times where you think you have a system in place, and then something impacts that. Like a couple years ago at RetroCon, we had a really bad line problem, but it was because we used to be able to separate the lines in two directions, and the hall next to us had an event going on, and we had to have them next to each other, like parallel, and they got intertwined, and it was just bad. So, like this most recent year, they rented a different hall, and we revamped the whole system, and it was phenomenal. Like, we fixed the problem the next year. And Too Many Games, another show that I help out with a lot. They've revamped their registration a few times, and they have security at their con because it's such an enormous convention. But they have just a phenomenal system that really speeds up people going through that. And it probably last year's registration, even with the security, was the best it had ever been. So, you never know what you're looking at, but if they plan ahead, hopefully those don't become detractors to an event.
Yeah, I felt so bad that year with the hall next door, because I was like, that you guys did it. I was like, I almost was going to volunteer. I was going to be like, give me a bunch of things and I'll just go down. I'll walk the line and go, who's got cash? And then just start handing out the badges and taking the cash.
Well, they were doing that at ZoloCon when I got there. I often do early registration for ZoloCon, and this year I decided I wasn't going to bother to spend the money. I was just going to go later. But I showed up like 10 minutes after the show opened, and the parking lot was pretty packed. But once I got a spot, Then when I walked up, it looked like there was a line, but then some guy just started shouting cash over here. And it was really just people trying to pull up their stuff on their phones. It was taking a little while in the other line. Cash, we just walked straight in. It was great.
Yeah.
So guests are a big factor for some people. Some people don't care at all who the guests are at a convention, and other people, that's like their whole reason for going. And so again, like price and location dictate some of these things. Are they getting A-list celebrities like you're talking about, Hayden Christensen? People that are in movies aren't at little toy shows generally.
Right. And you're going to see that cost passed right on to you in the cost of the ticket.
Right. B-list celebrities, people that are in TV shows or have a part in, less popular movies, you'll see at smaller shows. Voice actors, some of my favorite people I've gotten to meet at conventions happen to be voice actors. And then, of course, some shows have a lot of internet celebrities. That's a turnoff for certain people. They don't consider that like a guest or a famous person. To me, it's like meeting an author of a book or some other, level of celebrity that isn't, movie star famous or TV star famous. But sometimes those people are really interesting to get a chance to talk to. So, whatever your tier is. I've met wrestlers at shows. I'm trying to think of what some of the other guests are, but I've met all kinds of different people that were fun, even local celebrity type people.
They got to get Sven. What's his name? Sven Gulli, that dude.
Yeah.
He's a classic. But I was going to say also they have like sometimes like cosplay groups.
Yes.
Another kind of thing that they have sometimes. And those guys, they go all out, man. That's some really impressive. Like I love when they have like the Star Wars like legions and stuff like that. Like those guys do some impressive work for sure.
So we were actually at Ranger Station in Oaks, and that show was, I would say, a huge portion, like 50% vendor, 50% just guests. There
were a lot, yeah.
A chance to meet Power Ranger actors. You've been to Power Morphicon. I haven't been there, but for a local show, I've never been to a show that had more guests from like one genre. I've seen like a Thundercats reunion where there's 3 Thundercats voice actors or something like that. But this was, I don't know if there's 25 or 30 seasons of Power Rangers. There were probably 15 actors there, like it was a really big selection of people.
When you have a show that kind of drills down into a specific like subset, like obviously a Power Ranger convention is very, very specific.
Yes.
Most of the time you're going to a comic convention or something that's so generalized that they want to have a little bit of what appeals to everybody. But yeah, when you like with Morphicon, it's always in California because that's where most of the actors live. And so they do it specifically so that it's easy for them, which I totally get. But that also allows them to have 30, 50 of these actors there.
Right.
And so they'll have 2 or 3 rows that are just the actors' individual booths all together. They're actually starting to bring over Japanese actors from the Kamen Rider and Sentai shows, which I'm super excited about. I went to Japan World Heroes last year, which is a like a sub show that the same guy who does Morphicon runs.
Okay.
And I got to meet Kamen Rider Guy, my all-time favorite. So that was really cool. We were waiting for the show to open, and we were sitting in the hotel, and he came down into the lobby, and me and my friends were like, "Oh my god, he's in the lobby just hanging out." Like,
that's one of my favorite things. If you are at a convention that's hosted at a hotel, and the guests are cool, like if you get to, even if it's just a brief conversation in an elevator, or like they come and hang out sometimes if there's like a bar in the lobby or things like that. It's sometimes really neat to get to spend, a few minutes with the guest that isn't like standing in line to get your thing signed before the next person's like butting into your conversation.
Yeah, so they had 1 actor from Kamen Rider, 1 actor from Sentai, and 1 actor from Ultraman. Okay. And now obviously there's a language barrier. I know I took Japanese in college. I've forgotten most of it. And when you're meeting someone famous, you forget all of it. So I have all these grand, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this. And then in the moment you're just like, hi. And then, everything just goes away. But they were in the hotel and then they were talking and they had, I guess, like their handler or whatever who was translating things for them. And then I went outside and I ran into the actor who was playing Ultraman outside. And I managed to say like, hello, nice to meet you or something in Japanese. And he was like, oh, hi. And then he said something back to me in English. And I was like, that was so awesome. But it's just like you get so, I mean, I try not to get flustered, but it still happens. You can't control it sometimes. So, but that was really fun. Yeah, that was a great experience.
So this relates to your guests, but panels, and you kind of mentioned like cosplay panels, people talking about books they wrote. The guests often do Q&A panels, which are a lot of fun. I've seen a lot of interesting workshops, like customizing action figure contests or like custom painting workshops at conventions, as well as things like cosplay contests, karaoke contests, or trivia and things like that, which all can be a way to turn your downtime at the convention into kind of like a fun experience, especially if you have people with you.
Yeah, for sure. And again, back to Wizard World, they used to have, I think it was always Saturday, but after the show ended, they would have a cosplay contest. And it was always really fun because you didn't have to worry about missing something else.
Okay.
Because it was basically like, after pretty much everything you would do Saturday is over, here's this other thing. And it was always such a fun way to end the night because you just went and they kept one of the rooms, like they closed the main hall and everything else was closed, but they had this other big hall or room, and you just go in there and get a seat, and everyone who wanted to be a part of it gathered over here, and they took everyone's names and lined them up, and then they all come up on the stage, and that sometimes they would do like a quick action move or something depending on what their dress as anime character.
Right.
And it was just always really fun, and I always thought that was such a nice like bonus. Like you had your whole day, and now this was just a fun thing. You could just sit, unwind. You've been walking all day, get a nice seat. There was always plenty of room. They had them kind of like, there was like aisles through the crowd, so they would kind of come from the back, walk the aisle to get up the stage, so you could also kind of see them up close. Like it was
nice.
Really nicely done. And Fan Expo just doesn't have anything. Like I think they had a cosplay contest, but it was very like, we don't care about this, just so we can say we have one kind of a thing. And I don't know. There's just so many things about Wizard World that I thought they did right, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. And I'm still really bummed that it's gone now.
Yeah, like Too Many Games always has some sort of nighttime entertainment type things, like a concert. They had the guys from Epic Rap Battles of History there one year.
Nice.
And they did like a whole rap battle thing where they did different characters from their show. Like that was a really neat thing because it was the guests performing, and that was a lot of fun as sort of like a. It's in place of a panel, but a concert.
Yeah, and obviously the concert at RetroCon every year is always such a blast. And I like having that thing like after. Like it's part of it, but it's also kind of its own subset thing where it's kind of like, okay, we did all this together and we had a good time. Now it's like keeping the party. It's like an after party. You know what I mean? And I think that's so fun.
It's fun with that kind of stuff too, because like sometimes the vendors can get away and come be part of it. Like everybody becomes a fan for a minute instead of being like, we're attendees, you're staff, we're guests. It's just like, boom, we're all here.
Right. Everyone gets that chance to unwind and just have fun together. Exactly.
Yeah. Deals. If you don't go home with something, it's not as much fun, right?
Definitely, definitely true.
I go to the flea markets with a couple buddies of mine, and I always say, jokingly, even if somebody didn't buy much, as long as everybody bought something, everyone goes home happy.
A flea market's not as bad because usually you don't have to pay to get into that. You just kind of walk up.
It's totally true, but we joke about it because we get up early and go, and it's like as long as everybody bought something, everyone home with a trinket. And so if you go to a toy show or a convention, it's nice if you find stuff. Sometimes, prices get inflated. The dealers are, have expenses for being there and things like that. So it's nice when you find something that you're looking for and the price is right. You're not like going, oh, this is 3 times eBay, Yeah, no, it definitely, sure. If you consistently find stuff at a show, it'll make you want to go back to that show. And if you've gone to a show a couple times, and you're like, yeah, they only really ever have Transformer vendors there, and I don't collect Transformers, you're going to eventually go, yeah, I think I'm going to pass on that event.
No, 100%. And that's why I love variety that a lot of these kinds of shows have. So we were at that Ranger Station, which I had a really great time at that con. You and I did a table, so it was kind of, I've been a vendor kind of in the past, but it was like my first time as like an official vendor at a show.
Yeah.
And I had so much fun, and it, not that you like specifically price stuff high, but people are going to want to haggle. So I kind of had that mindset, and especially towards the end of the day where you're just like, I don't want to take this back home.
Right.
So you're just like, what does that say? 3 for $1 or whatever it is, 4 for $1. Let's go. And then people get excited. And then, especially if you have like a box or something for them to root through or something, and there's something about the human psyche where if I put everything nice on the table for you, you'll walk by it and go, I don't care, and leave. But if I go, here's a bin and who knows what could potentially be inside it, you'll go through that bin for an hour and maybe still not buy anything, but you want to, I mean, you've seen them at Walmart where they used to do those big DVD bins, $5, and you're just like, maybe there's a treasure at the bottom, and you just start digging, and there's something drawing about that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but yeah, so like that kind of stuff, like I had a great time, and I'm so bummed. I don't want to say bummed, but like I hope the show still does well, but they moved it to this this hotel near the airport now for this year, and it's also like the weekend after RetroCon, and I'm just
right
like,
after RetroCon.
I'm like, guys, you're killing me, because I had such a good time. I was actually really looking forward to going again. I'm like, you know, it's June-ish, July. It's a good time. Not much else is happening. It was in Oaks, where I was already super familiar with from RetroCon, and it was great. Everything just lined up. And now they're like, now it's super far away, and in a month that's already packed with other stuff. And I was like,
I have a feeling it'll be back to Oaks at some point. Maybe.
I hope so, yeah. And I'm not trying to discourage. If anyone's thinking about going, I'm not trying to discourage you at all, because, like I said,
no,
I had a really fun time.
If you want to meet Ranger actors, you got to go to that thing. And if you want to buy any kind of, you know, anime and Power Ranger and Henshin products, that's the place to be.
Oh, that's the reason I brought it up. Thank you. I was going to say that even though it was a Power Ranger specific convention, people had stuff from everything. I mean, there wasn't just Power Ranger merchandise. There certainly was some, because of course you want to have that, but there was all kinds of 80s and 90s toys. So it was nice. It had a nice mix, you know, for everybody, which I thought was great.
Exhibits. So this is one of the things I was saying, when you start getting over that $20 price tag, you start to, it's not like I demand it, but you start to, usually there's enough space for a few little extra things like exhibits. So sometimes there's a photo op, whether it's a famous car or some sort of standee type thing. Sometimes there's arcades. Sometimes there's like a prop display of some sort. RetroCon used to do a Spaceballs prop display every year. Sometimes the cosplay groups will bring, like, you know, a droid or a vehicle that they can assemble, or the G.I. Joe group brings like a Cobra throne. And
yeah, that throne is massive.
Yeah. So like those are the kind of things that are kind of like exhibits or additional features, something else to do besides just looking at the toys. Because if you go to one of these conventions and you're not really a toy collector, but you're just more there for the sights and sounds, you want a little something else to do. So the panels and exhibits give you that value.
Yeah, the props can be fun. Like, and honestly, even the simplest thing of that kind of like red carpet wall that everyone puts up, like usually like right inside the entrance, people love taking their pictures in front of them. I mean, even that it's a simple thing. It's just a screen you put up, and that's a lot of fun for people, which is great. I wanted to share a story real quick. I just remembered there was one year, and I can't remember where it was, but it was one of the Warcraft games. And I don't know if you're familiar with Warcraft at all, but the Lich King has his frozen throne, right? Because he has like the Ice Kingdom he's in charge of. So it was this big throne made of ice, and he has a sword that was like stuck in the ground next to it. And I saw this picture online where someone had taken a picture where they had brought like an extra pair of boxers. And so they sat on the throne and put because they're wearing shorts. So they put the boxers around their ankles, and then they got out a newspaper, and then they put a roll of toilet paper on the handle of the sword. So it looked like he was using the throne. Oh my God. I was like, people were so clever. Like, that was absolutely
to fantastic. Think ahead to bring all that stuff.
Absolutely. But I've also seen like the throne from Game of Thrones. I've seen that places where you can take pictures, which is really cool. And have you ever seen, there used to be a group, and I don't know if they still do it, but they'd always have like a big pirate ship, and there'd be guys dressed as pirates. And I don't even know what they were selling, or
I don't know either. They were at Too Many Games one time, and they were at South Jersey Geek Fest one time. I saw them.
And I think I've seen them at, what was the one that went out of business? Greater Philly
Con or Expo.
That's another one. That was trying to get too big too fast and just passed all of the cost from the guests.
That was one of those shows that would frustrate me. It was like $45 to get in, and then every celebrity was $45 to get an autograph.
It was like just for a Saturday. Like, it wasn't even like a weekend pass.
Like, wow, what is this?
It was like $50 a day, and there were like 7 vendors because they weren't making any money. And then, like you said, there were some impressive guests, but they just passed all that cost. And that's the thing. You have to kind of figure out how to mitigate that to make that back somewhere else, because you can't do that. It's going to turn people. And they ended up, I think the pandemic killed them too, unfortunately. But
their original format, they were like up in Allentown in like a
yeah, there was a
back
dirt
room.
mall.
Yeah, at the dirt mall, and I loved the show there because it was cheap. It was cheap to get in.
Yeah, I think it was like $12 the one time I went there.
Expensive to get an autograph, like maybe $20 or whatever. Because I met Austin St. John up there and Walter Jones. I actually got to talk to the girl who played Aunt Beru in the prequels by accident. I was like in the front of the line to go in, and this blonde girl just walks up and she's like, "When are they going to open the doors?" And I was like 5 minutes. And she's like, "Oh." And then I realized it was her, and I was like, "Pretty sure you're allowed to just go in." And I like tugged on the door because it wasn't locked because they're about to open the convention. And she was like, "Oh, thanks." And she like went in. So later on, I was like, "I'm glad you made it in here." Okay.
But that's the other thing, because it was in the dirt mall, it wasn't like a dedicated, like I think they had one room at the end of the hall that was like their dedicated rented vendor room.
Right.
But then there were just stores that were just always in that that mall.
Some that were related to the topic and some that were not, but there was like comics
and
wrestling and toys and all that stuff. It was great.
Yeah, so it was like you could, and that's why I was like, I think people can just, because I almost feel like they charged us before we could even get to those stores. But I'm like, what if I'm just a guy who wanted to come to the dirt mall on a Saturday? Like, are you telling me I have to pay you to just go to the comic book store that I always go to? Like, I always wondered how that worked. But
yeah, I think maybe you just got wristbanded to go into that part.
The part at the end of the hallway. Yeah, that's what makes sense.
You just want to go to the shops. But that was a situation where they had a fun little thing, and then they tried to blow it up into like a big convention, and it grew too fast.
Yeah, they really tried to grow too fast, and it did not work out. But
exclusives. So this is kind of like the guests, where sometimes this is like a make it break it for certain people, and other people don't care at all. The Joe convention that is no longer a thing, but the G.I. Joe convention, that was a huge part of it, was that there were exclusive figures actually made by Hasbro for the Collectors Club every year. Have you ever bought exclusive figures from a convention?
I was just thinking, like, the only conventions I feel like that really do exclusives are the two big ones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like San Diego and New York. And you can usually just buy those online somewhere. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't actually have to go to the show most times to get those.
Right.
I know with Hasbro this year, they had San Diego exclusives, but then they just opened them up later on their site, and I don't think they sold out. I think they had plenty of them. I mean, I think eventually they did, but like Chuckles and whatever else there was, I can't remember. Right. I think there was a Transformer, but they were around for a while. So like you didn't really have to go to that show.
No, and I think they've gotten to that point now. But I think years ago the exclusives were much more exclusive.
Yeah, it was harder, but I think they're starting to pull away from it, because it is one of those things where it's like, sure, it's fun if I'm going and I can get one and it's not that much of a hassle, but so many people can't go, and then
it sucks if you collect that line and you can never get that one character.
And I think it's gotten to the point where, I mean, the pandemic, I'm sure, fueled a lot of it as well. But they're starting to realize that, like, yeah, it's fun, but at the same time, it's alienating a lot of our fan base. And so why are we still doing this? Why don't we just sell the people who want the toys?
Right.
So, I mean, because they're not profiting off the secondary market. That money's not going in their hands. So why are they doing this? But yeah, I can't say. Morphicon has exclusives every once in a while, but they're not usually anything that's I've got to have this. I
got wrapped up in that Lord Draken debacle with Morphicon. I didn't attend, but I paid to attend. Like, I paid the.
Did you get it?
Nope.
You never got one?
I got an autographed picture from JDF as an apology.
Oh, well, that's nice. At least
they sent something. Yeah, I got the T-shirt and the lanyard, like that was part of like buying your badge. But then they had sold too many of the figures, so they just came back with a letter that was like, we overcalculated, whatever. Here's this autographed picture. So, it's nice that I got the picture. It was a nice apology. It was something of value for the.
I was going to say the good news for
I was disappointed.
That figure was not good.
That's what I heard. And since Lightning
Hasbro has since made a better one, so there is that at least.
I am happier to have the autographed picture now that I have a Lightning Collection figure than when I thought Legacy was the only way we were ever going to get him.
Yeah, those were not. I have one of my friends. His Twitter handle is J-Man, but he did the now famous video where he's shaking the figure and the
Oh,
legs are so wobbly, and he says something like, "This is a piece of crap," and he throws it across the room and it hits the ground and just shatters into pieces, and then he just goes, "Shattered grid," and that's the end of the video. And I was like, I mean, because he's the kind of guy who's just like, yeah, I paid money for this, but I don't care. It's terrible. And I don't think he expected it to shatter into pieces
Right,
when he
right.
threw it. I think he just was throwing it, but you heard it because it hit the hard floor of the room he was in. It just shattered into pieces. Yeah, that was unfortunately not a very good, well-made figure. But that was probably the last time that I feel like they had something that was a big draw that people were very excited for. And I do not know this for 100%, so I don't want to disparage anybody if I'm wrong, but I think the people who did what you did for last year are still waiting on that stuff.
Oh, geez.
I don't know if those ever went out or not. Again, I could be wrong, and apologies if I'm wrong. I don't want to drag anyone, but if that's the case, that's a bummer. That's a real bummer.
There's a lot of little shows though that do their own exclusive where they like customize something. That used to happen, especially a lot more in like the 90s, but now even still, like New Jersey Collectors Convention has occasionally had custom things. Joe Fest occasionally has it. Like a toy store or something like that will sponsor a custom, and they basically buy figures, swap out some parts, maybe get somebody to custom mold some new accessories, repaint, and release, in some sort of clamshell packaging, like a show exclusive that is actually a custom release, but it's still kind of fun.
No, that's cool.
Sometimes
and I feel
those
like
go for big bucks later.
I was going to say, with the way you can 3D print all kinds of stuff now, you could definitely, commission someone to 3D print some accessories or something for you that could make it a little bit more exclusive. That's actually really cool. That's very ambitious, but if you can pull it off, that's awesome.
Rare items. I think that along with wanting to be able to get deals and buy things that you want, it is really fun when you go to a show and you see something you've never seen in person, or just something that you don't see every day. So I threw Eternia on here because actually at ZoloCon, the store Eternia Dreams had a display. They had the vintage Eternia and the brand new Mattel Creation ones, both with the monorails going, stacked on top of each other, like on shelves. And it was really impressive. I own Eternia, so like all of that is
a little bit of a flex there.
Yeah, but I mean the all of seeing it at a show isn't quite there for me, but seeing both of them was super impressive. It's all set up and going. Cool. But other stuff, like I don't think I've been to a ZoloCon in the past 3 or 4 years where there wasn't a loose scratch for sale from Ninja Turtles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's like a really rare piece that you just don't see every day.
All that end of the line stuff, like the Dalmatian guy, and
right. So any of that stuff I think is really fun to be able to at least get to see it.
No, 100%. And like you said, I want to buy stuff. I want to add to the collection, but at the same time, I don't need to buy everything that I see, or at least I need to tell myself that. But it is cool. Like, I remember seeing like things that you don't even expect to ever own. Like sometimes they'll have those like the Happy Meal display bubble that has all the toys in it that was inside the restaurant to tell kids, hey, tell your mom to buy you this. I love seeing that kind of stuff. Anything McChangeables, like, and I even have some right here, but as I drop them, but they make fantastic desk toys, by the way. That kind of stuff. Like, I love seeing old packaging. Do I need to own the original box to Castle Grayskull? No. Do I want to see it and take a picture of it? 100%, because that artwork was amazing back in the day. So, it's really cool. It's almost like toy show / museum exhibit in a way, which is really, really fun.
Well, that's what I thought when I saw the Eternia Dream display. Like, they had so many rare boxed things, but then to drag a vintage Eternia to the show and set it all up.
And they had was it a repro track or was it the original track?
It was probably a repro track because the original.
That's almost irresponsible to do with the original track.
So the conditions when I bought my Eternia was that I had to buy a repro set, and I was not allowed to assemble the complete unbroken vintage track that came with it.
Probably doesn't exist.
That was part of the conditions of me buying it, was that I would never break those tracks.
That's crazy.
That's just the way it works. But it was just super cool to see it, the two of them together like that. Like that,
sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me that was set up in their store. But to see them pack it up, bring it to PA, and set it up on a console.
Because they're like in Ohio, right? Isn't that where they are? Where
I
are they
thought
located?
they were in Maryland, but I'm not
Maryland?
sure.
Okay.
I've never been there.
I've heard the name of the store and it sounds awesome. I want to check. If I had known, I gotta be more diligent about when cons are happening. Because
I got to start texting you ahead of time when.
Maybe that's what I just
PA.
need you to be my unofficial con secretary. But yeah, because you were like, oh, I went to ZoloCon today, and I was like, that was today. I would have gone. I didn't know that was a thing, and I had no idea that all these stores and I heard like some companies were showing product there as well. So that's really cool.
That show, well, and PowerCon is another one where it's more and more of a trade show in a way, where these smaller toy companies. So ZoloCon always has the Mythic Legion stuff by the Four Horsemen. Okay. They're always there. And there were several other small toy lines that were being shown off at the show. And that's
awesome, though. I mean, to grow really that cool. Big that you have the draw for those companies to come in, that's really fantastic.
Well, with ZoloCon being run by Zolo World, the company that makes action figures, it like makes sense that they would know people.
Okay.
Yeah, so like ZoloCon always has exclusive figures for their Realm of the Underworld line and things like that.
Okay.
And this year they actually had an exclusive Mythic Legion that was like a crossover thing to Realm of the Underworld. So that was kind of a neat idea.
Yeah, for sure.
So
that's cool. Yeah, I think I read somewhere they're doing it again in August. I gotta try to get to that one.
Maybe. Yeah, they try to do it a couple times a year. They actually tried a video game show also in the same venue.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I don't know. I skipped that one because I figured there was less there that I was interested in.
Yeah, I love video games, but I'm not like a retro video game collector. You know, whatever carts and things that I have from when I was a kid, I still have, but I'm not one of those. I mean, I know that demographic exists, and I think that's really cool, and I love that it does, but it's not another money sink I need to get into because that can get pricey fast.
So this doesn't always happen, especially at a smaller show. But if you
never see it like this, I can tell you that.
No, but I would
love to see it like this.
If you go to a big show, you have to have some places that you can sit down. You need some places to chill. You can't walk all day. Your feet are killing you. You just want to set down the bag of stuff that you bought. You want to, be able to eat that overpriced hot dog that you bought from the food court at the place, You
want to get your $5 Coke. You know what I mean? We've both been there.
Yeah.
So this, I did mention earlier in this episode, NYCC. And this past year was the first time I had ever been to one. I had always talked about it with the wife. We should go, it's so close, because I pretty much decided I'm never going to San Diego Comic-Con. Sounds fun. I'd love to, but it's a expensive
reality
trip. Yeah. To get out to California, twice in 1 year or whatever. But in any case, New York's so close. It's in my backyard. I can drive there in 2 hours, whatever the case. So it's like, we should do this. And then I had an opportunity where I was able to get in, and you've been to the Javits.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine the Javits. Now at Toy Fair is such a beautiful show.
Toy Fair is not a convention. It's a trade show. Right. It is completely different. You can't buy tickets.
Right, exactly. So there's a reasonable amount of people there. Like, we ate lunch there. We found a table. Took us a couple minutes, but eventually it worked out.
I think we shared a table with some people.
You don't have a prayer at NYCC. You have been to the Javits. The opening area when you walk in is shoulder to shoulder people. You can't even move. There is, and I don't know if you knew this, there is an entire food court in the basement. Okay. Did you know this about the Javits?
Yeah.
Because we've always eaten in that like up top area.
Right. No, I have eaten down below before.
If you go downstairs, it's like a mall food court. It's massive. Yeah. And there's a whole like bunch of places down there. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know about this. That was wall to wall. There were people sitting on the stairs because there was nowhere else to sit. There were people sitting on the floors. Every corner had people sitting.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. They were sprawled out. There was an area where it was just a big open space, like in front of a panel room or something. People just laying on the floor. You couldn't even walk up the steps. There were so many people just sitting on every step. Like, they were trying to get to the wall as much as possible. So there was some room, but it didn't matter. There was, because like me and my wife, we got in line to buy food, and we stood in line for like 20 minutes and it didn't move at all. And I was just like, even if we get food, there's nowhere to go.
Right.
So let's just, I mean, it was pouring rain that day and we had forgotten an umbrella and we were still just like, let's just go back to the hotel room. Like, it's just too much. It was too much. That convention is so big. And the Javits is a big convention center.
Huge building.
Big, and it's got multiple
blocks
floors.
Long.
And there's a 4th and a 5th floor that I had never been to before with Toy Fair because they don't use those floors. But there's a mile-long escalator that takes you into the sky. That there's a floor up there, and like that was packed. And I was just like, how are so many people in this place at one time? It was exhausting. It was crazy. It was just too. I mean, again, I'm an older person at this point, so I'm sure my age, if I was 25 with a crew of my friends, I'd be having the time of my life, I'm sure. But, it was just too much. And it was, normally those tickets are pricey.
Yeah.
I mean, you end up paying $60 for like Thursday when nobody's there. Right. And then trying to navigate the panels, like there wasn't a great, like they didn't give you books. Like sometimes conventions, like a bigger convention will give you like a little book and it's very handy. It was all online. And there was so many things, and there was so many, like, there were a few panels with like celebrities, but not like in the traditional way you'd think. But there was so much of like, Bob's going to show you how to make a cosplay sword. Sarah's going to show you how to make cosplay skirts. And they were all different events and they're all different rooms. And so when you're trying to go through the list of possible panels, you can't find anything because it's like much. Trying to, there's so much to comb through. I was just like, I don't know how people are doing this, but it was insane. And there's definitely no place to chill. Like even trying to go outside, it was crazy. And like, because the way they had, like with Toy Fair, you can just basically walk up to the Javits and pick whatever door you want to go in. They have, corrals and like tents that this is the only entrance and this is the only exit. And I get it because with that many people, it would be pure chaos. So they have to put something in place. But I don't think I'll ever go again. And like the opportunity I was offered was so nice and so thoughtful that I was able to go. And I'm so appreciative of it, but it's just too much for me. I don't think I'll go again. Like it's too much.
Well, so there is some interesting things to like your experience at a con too. Like there are different ways of experience at conventions. So you have like your traditional attendee thing. If you're a volunteer at an event, you see a different side of things. You're there before and after hours. Sometimes you get a little extra, elbow rubbing with the celebrity, in the green room kind of thing. If you're somehow a preferred member, like if you get passes to a contest or VIP or whatever, right? So every show can kind of have its own little experience like that too, where if you were a general attendee and you stood in line forever versus you had the VIP pass, you got right in, or whatever the story is,
sure.
Those all impact your experience of a convention or an event.
No, it's definitely true.
Because I think volunteering is kind of a neat way. If you don't have friends that go to a show, or if you do have friends you can volunteer with, it's kind of a neat way, especially for younger people that don't want to spend the money on a ticket. You can earn your ticket basically for free by volunteering. You do a certain number of shifts. And so that can be kind of a cool thing. And some of the cons do a really nice job of kind of like building a camaraderie out of that. Like Tony Games has their Defenders. I helped out at a MagFest one time, like those kind of things. And, it's just kind of like a neat, different experience.
I think for me, I mean, obviously, I think in general, I prefer a smaller show that's just less hectic and chaotic. Yeah. But I think the volunteering thing plays into that as well, because I can't imagine trying to be a volunteer at New York Comic Con.
No, I can't.
I mean, and the top story at this year was at some point somebody actually defecated on the floor in the middle of New York Comic Con last year. So if someone called me to be like, "Hey, clean this up," I'd be like, and this is where we part ways, because
here's my free t-shirt
volunteer
back
for this. Yeah, what do you need? You need the t-shirt back? That's fine, you can have it. But like at a calmer show, I would have a lot of fun probably being a volunteer, talking to people in a reasonable space and helping people get over here, or helping a celebrity set up his table or whatever the case. You know what I'm saying? Like in a reasonable
for the
atmosphere.
line, people aren't cutting in line or whatever. Yeah.
Sometimes you have to go get some painter's tape and you have to make a line on the floor to make sure that people can get to the Angry Video Game Nerd. Sometimes you got to do it.
It happens.
You got to take care of it, people. So, yeah, that kind of stuff. But that kind of stuff I'm super happy to do. But yeah, I think I've really just determined that I have a threshold of the size of a show that I can go to, and I can't go beyond that.
No, I get that. I find the travel to a show, if it's, like a stayover kind of show, can be a lot of fun, but sometimes that adds a lot of stress for me. I get like worked up about the plane or the train or whatever if I'm not just driving there with some friends.
Yeah, I know people who are afraid to fly.
Okay.
I'm annoyed to fly. I'm not afraid, although recent stories, I'm not super excited, but I hate everything about it. I hate getting up early. I hate driving there. I hate finding a parking spot. I hate checking my bag. I hate getting to the terminal early just so that it can be delayed and you have to sit there and be bored. Then you get on the plane and it's tight and it's uncomfortable and someone's brought a dog for some reason and the babies are crying. And then you finally get there and then you just want to get off as fast as possible and run to some fresh air outside. So I just hate everything about flying. I don't like to do it. I've done it. I do it when I have to, but yeah, but see, the thing is, I don't like long car rides either. So that's why I'm I want a show that's within an hour and I can just drive there and have fun and everything's chill. So yeah,
I mean, most of the shows I go to are a, hour or less drive. I go there and I come home the same day, unless it's something that's a multi-day show like RetroCon or Too Many Games. And those are sort of my two big cons of the year where I plan to stay for the whole weekend and stay in a hotel. And that has its own fun experience to that.
Yeah, that can be fun. I mean, you don't have to go so far away to still have fun just having a weekend where you stay.
Where you stay.
It's easier to just be well, and I also think, again, and I've said this before, but if you have a situation where, okay, there's a toy show this weekend, I'm going to go by myself because I'm looking for a couple things. I'm going to be in and out in an hour, and then I get on with the rest of my day. Totally fine. That's one experience, and that can be great. But if you have a situation where, especially if it's kind of like a destination con, you want to kind of make sure you have some friends going. At least that's how I usually feel, because I tell the story of the first time I ever went to Power Morphicon. Now, this is, again, I had to fly across the country to get to this convention. And all of my friends that are going to this don't live near me. So we're not traveling together. So if I had gotten there my first time and didn't meet anybody, it would have been a very different show. I would have spent all this money. I would have walked around for a while, gotten bored, and then went back to my hotel room and be why did I waste all this time? But luckily, I knew Collector Shuki, if anyone knows from YouTube. We had started talking online and become friends, and she was going to be there. So I knew I had at least one friend. And then through her, I met a lot of my other friends, which I'm still very good friends with now. And it made the total difference. And I often say to her, I'm if you weren't there, if I didn't know you going to that, I don't know if I would have gone, because it would have been a very different show. I would have spent all this money, probably gotten bored very quickly, and then, you know what I mean? Because with that kind of stuff, you want to have, even if the show gets boring, you and your friends just go get something to eat, or you go hang out, or you catch up, you tell stories, whatever. You talk about toys you saw that day. That can make all the difference. That can change an experience so completely different. So, yeah, that's why I usually like to, if it's a destination con or something, I try to make sure that I'm not going by myself, because then I'm kind of well, then why am I doing it?
If you're going to be staying overnight, you want to know you have some friends there, because there is going to be downtime. That just has to be.
And that can be some of the funnest time. You know what I mean? The
absolutely.
Con is great, but if you guys are just sitting around, that could be sometimes even more fun than the con.
Right. Oh yeah. Sometimes the inside jokes that come out of that stuff, or the wacky things that happen, just, we have stories about hotels. We're doing a road trip, and literally the other person's hotel room, the bathroom didn't work in it, and just disastrous stuff. I would never stay at Extended Stay America ever again. These jokes that we have from these trips.
I think about our yearly trip to the increasingly substandard Moe's. Every year we go, it's just a little bit worse, and we're not really quite sure how. But
welcome to Moe's.
Yeah. Yeah, the first year it was welcome to Moe's, and then by now it's like, did you have to come to Moe's because I don't want to be here?
Look, we're out of beef. I really don't want to make more beef. Could you pick something that doesn't have beef in it?
Yeah. The last time I was there, I was like, whatever condiment it was, I was like, can I have this? He's like, I'd have to go to the back to get it. I'm like, can you do that? He's like, fine. And it wasn't even like a thing he'd have to unpack. It was like a dressing or something. He literally just went in the other room and came back with a cylinder. It took him 15 seconds. But he asked like I was asking him to build me a house. Yeah, it was crazy.
All right. And of course, we've already mentioned this, but Friends, this was us at...
I did kind of jump the gun.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I feel like that's it. That it weaves in with all of these shows. Like the best thing about the shows is talking to people, right? And sometimes it's a vendor, you know, sometimes it's a friend you're walking around with. Sometimes you get to make a friend, even if it's just a friend for the day. I've had some great conversations just by bumping into somebody and asking them, oh, what did you pick up? Like, what is that thing that you're carrying? And you end up having some great conversation. You know, and it's not like a lifelong friend, but that's what makes it fun is the actual interaction more so than just like, yeah, I stared at a whole bunch of tables of stuff. You know, it's no, that, like, what is this? Oh, let me tell you about this thing. Here's how I found this, the story behind some item. You know, somebody's like, oh yeah, actually my friend Rose just at Zolocon bought some Care Bear holiday cards.
Family friend worked for was American Greetings, or the company that did it, and I loved Care Bears when I was a kid. So he used to put them aside to give to my grandmother as a friend of my grandmother's.
And the guy who was selling them said they were literally his like uncle's friend worked at American Greetings or Hallmark or whoever, and he knew the kid liked Care Bears, so he used to like get him extra ones for his grandmother, the uncle, whoever it was, so that way he could always get like a Care Bear card. And so somehow he had these 80s Care Bear cards that were never used, and so you know, Rose was buying them, but it was just fun to hear the story.
Yeah.
And then we got into, you know, bigger conversations with him about other stuff, and that was a positive interaction with basically a stranger.
Yeah, you know? No, for sure. I mean, because you have that kind of built-in sense of camaraderie because you already share an interest.
Right. Just like, Care Bears. We like Care Bears.
You know, I want to buy this thing that you're selling, so obviously we both know what it is. We have some kind of opinion on it. And that already builds like a camaraderie right there off the bat. So yeah, that can be a lot of fun for sure.
So those are the things I think that make a good con. It's hard to master that and distill that down and have like the perfect con experience because there's so many things that can ruin it. And everyone has a different like percentage of what they need. To one person, there's too many vendors, and somebody else there wasn't enough guests or the right guest or whatever. So it's hard to balance that for sure. I give a lot of credit to show exhibitors or, you know, the people that run the shows that do a really good job of balancing that stuff out and finding something for everyone, you know?
Yeah. And even like when they're open to take feedback too, when it's like, you know, hey, was there anything from this year that, you know, was a pain point for you? Was there anything from this year that you loved, something that drove you nuts, something that made you almost not want to come back? You know what I mean? Take that. And then you can make little tweaks. Because I feel like the skeleton is the hardest thing to set up. But then once you have that, you know, adjusting little tweaks, probably not as difficult.
Yeah.
And then you can really fine tune it.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. You know, if you guys have thoughts about other things that make a show good or disastrous, let us know in the comments down below. Chris, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Do you want to plug all the different things you're on? You've got all kinds of projects.
So my main thing is my YouTube channel, which is Long's Toys. You can just search. I think it's like youtube.com/@Long's Toys now. They made it so that the symbol is part of it. Yeah. So I do all kinds of toy reviews, mostly like Transformers, Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, you know, mostly giant robot themed. But also I just launched a Lego specific YouTube channel, which I'm calling Long's Bricks.
Okay.
So that would be youtube.com/@Long's Bricks. For Long's Toys, it's @Long's Toys on most things except Twitter. That when I tried to get that was already taken and suspended. And I guess they don't ever release those things after they suspend them. So my Twitter is at CLong83 for Long's Toys, and then it's at Long's. I was able to get Long's Bricks for that.
Okay.
So I have Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky for Long's Bricks, and that's all just at Long's Bricks. And then everything else on most social things is at Long's Toys, with the exception of Twitter. So,
all right. Well, anyway, guys, thanks for hanging on the peg with us.
Absolutely.